more broadly about the transfer portal, I'm curious how it helps your evaluation when you have a guy that's maybe playing at a lower level and you see him dominating, but then you get to see him against that sort of top tier talent in college football. How has that changed for you over the past couple of years?
Well, I think it's awesome. It's been a huge opportunity for evaluators to be able to look at these guys step up in competition. Anytime you have a big projection from the level of competition to where you're going to go. The Senior Bowl was a good way to see the playing field level a little bit and see how they perform. But now you're getting a chance to really see these guys challenge themselves. There's a bunch of two-time transfers in this draft that just climbed the ladder. So I think it makes life easier as an evaluator. I feel bad as someone who went to Appalachian State that schools like the one I went to have been rated with their guys, but from an evaluation standpoint for what they're going to do at the next level, it's made it a little bit easier.
And then the ability to pick up multiple schemes.
Yeah, one of the things is you bring guys from college to the NFL. How are they going to adjust to having money? How are they going to adjust to a new scheme? How are they going to adjust to a new city? A lot of these kids have had to deal with all three of those things.
Hey, Daniel,
yeah. If it's close between players and you have a 20-year-old and a 25-year-old, obviously you're going to take the 20-year-old, but teams are not as concerned with the age, that I've talked to, going through this process. A lot of times the running joke is that the contract, what's second contract? And it's like, well, the GM's worried about his second contract, so let's try and get 4 or 5 good years out of this player. If he gives us that and we move on, it's a good pick.
Hey, your thoughts on the edge class overall, maybe ranking it to the last decade you've been doing this. I know you talked about just how talented it is. Where's it kind of rank up there? Is it better?
I think it's really good. I think it's really deep. I don't know. There's not a Myles Garrett, in my opinion. There's not a Nick Bosa. Those guys. We've had other years where we've had guys carry bigger individual grades, but we have 3 legit top 10 players in this draft, and we've got depth. I think you can get depth all the way into the 4th round, where you'll see guys making an impact next year. It's a really good group.
Hey, Daniel, the Bills this year obviously made the coaching change, and they're probably going to change their defense. How challenging is it for their staff, their scouting staff, that spent the whole fall scouting maybe a particular way for a defense, and now they've got to do some different alterations here? How challenging is that for a staff?
I don't think it's as difficult as you'd think. You go and you watch the player, you write up the report, the strengths and weaknesses, and only difference would be, okay, well, I gave him this grade because of the fit. Well, now that we're in a different scheme, you need to have communication with your coaches to your scouts, which every time there's a coaching change, you have your scouts together for meetings. They'll bring in the coaches and say, okay, for our edge rushers, we kind of want a little more size with what we do, whereas the other team, we can play with a smaller linebacker. We need to really be able to run. So then you just kind of change your stack on the board, but it's not like you wasted your time going there and evaluating the guy in the fall. It's just, okay, now this guy maybe gets a little bit of a boost with the changes we've made.
Knowing what Jim Leonard did at Wisconsin and what they've done in Denver the last couple of years, what are a couple edge rushers that maybe the Bills could maybe target at 26?
Well, I think speed. That Broncos defense has a lot of speed off the edge. You look at the get-off numbers, there with Benito and Cooper, they're 2 of the best in the league. So if you're looking at fastball rushers and where they're picking, Cassius Howell, does he get there, from Texas A&M? I think there's a chance he runs in the 4.4s here. He's got legit giddy-up speed. So that would be one that would just be right off the top of my head. And then, a guy like Malachi Lawrence out of UCF, maybe in the 3rd round, is another really good player. He's got a great first step. But when you play the Broncos and you play that defense last year, some teams are going to test your breaks of your tackles, and other teams are going to test your ability to really get out and cover up speed. They are speed.
Daniel, how would you evaluate the quarterback class outside of Mendoza?
I think there's some intriguing guys. I don't think it's the, obviously what we saw 2 years ago with that group in the upper echelon guys and seeing 6 of them come off the board. I don't see that. But after Mendoza, Ty Simpson's one that's fascinating. If you take that small sample size of those good games early in the year, you can get excited about him. I went back through this morning and was just watching more on him and looked at all of his 3rd and 7 throws that he made, and it was not an Alabama supporting cast that you're accustomed to seeing. I mean, there is a lot of pressure on him. There's not a lot of guys uncovering down the field. So you can excuse away maybe some of the drop-off in performance late. You can't run away from the fact that the limited number of starts, the track record there has not been good. but you can find really good tape on him. So there's intrigue with him. And then after that, I think you get into, Carson Beck, who I think is going to have a little bit of a rise up as we go through the rest of the process, because he's big, he's won a lot of games, he's played a lot of games. How he does through the interview process, and it will be important, but I think he'll spin the ball really well. And then you get to like Nussmeier, who's day 2 pick for me. Drew Aller, that's a tough one to figure out. But again, you've got the size, and he's incredibly intelligent and bright. Didn't have a lot of talent at the receiver position with him. Is that a 3rd round? Is that a 4th round? So I think there's intriguing guys. I just don't think that we have a year where we're going to see 3, 4, 5 of these guys go in the first 40 picks.
Daniel, the Bears are in kind of a tricky spot. They have no safeties currently on their roster.
Yeah.
Linebackers have some long-term injuries, but everybody is talking about getting to the quarterback. Ryan Poles said he wants speed on defense. How do you see this process playing out for Chicago?
I'd be excited if I was Chicago, because most times your team in the past that's had some struggles, you come in here and you're like, well, gosh, we hope we got the right coach. We hope our quarterback's going to pan out, or we're looking for a quarterback. So having those pillars taken care of, this is the easy part. Find safeties who can run and cover. You're going to be able to find those every draft in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. There's going to be options for you of guys who can come in and play and contribute. They've got the pillars in place. The offensive line's in a pretty good spot right now. So getting some edge rushers and some dynamic edge rushers, this is a good draft to do that. And if you're looking at the safety position, day 2, even into the 4th round, there's good players.
Daniel, you backed Jeremiah Love to the Chiefs. What are some pivots maybe that you considered, and even trading back potentially for Kansas City?
I think every team that I've talked to, and it's always the same at this time of the year, is, hey, do you think we can trade back? I'm still waiting for the first team that's like, hey, we'd really like to trade up in this draft. But, Kansas City, I look at it a little different. You could say, okay, we could trade back and fill a couple needs. How often is Kansas City going to be picking here to get a blue chip impact player that's going to be cost controlled for the next 4 or 5 years? I tend to say, like, look, hey, maybe one of these edge rushers falls to us. If Jeremiah Love's there, I think he's the 2nd best player in the draft. A chance to get a cheap blue chip caliber player, to me, I think I fall more in line with that than the trade back.
Yeah, wide receiver is a position that's people are always excited about.
Yeah.
What are the traits that you think are most important to this game when you're looking at classes? And what do you think of this class from strengths from top to bottom?
Yeah, there's, again, with the edge rushers and the receivers, I think there's all different flavors. And in terms of, some teams are just shopping for different things. But when I look at wideouts and guys that have hit and been successful really over the last 7 or 8 years, I think some of the underrated components of it are guys who have play strength. They're really strong. They're strong with their hands through the catch. They're grounded through the catch. They run through the ball. They don't have to leave their feet and cradle the ball. Like, you think about Puka Nacua is a great example of that. JSN's another great example of that. Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are not little spindly guys. Like, these are strong, sturdy guys, and they're sturdy through the catch. They're sturdy after the catch. So that's become a big thing for me. And I also think even when you get into the postseason, we talk separation. Well, you play the better defenses, the better teams in the postseason, there's just not going to be a lot of separation. You're going to have to be a ball winner and someone who's physically strong. And then the other component is, like, mentally sharp. You look at JSN, came in with that reputation. Ibuka, who had some immediate success, came in with that reputation. T-Mac with the Panthers was an incredibly bright football guy. So I think those are some of the underrated components, not just how fast you run, how high you jump.
Hey, Daniel, Bill's down around that 60 area in the 2nd round, receiver-wise. What are you thinking there? I mean, if they go that way, who's going to be a good pick at that spot?
Yeah, I think there's going to be good options there. I mean, I think there's, Jeremy Bernard from Alabama is someone that's intriguing to me in that portion of the draft. I would have said, before the Senior Bowl, maybe you have a shot at a Malachi Fields from Notre Dame at that point in time, but I think he's probably off the board when you get there. But there's going to be a laundry list of intriguing options there, just depending on what you're looking for. I like the bigger guys. Brazel from Tennessee is going to be a little bit of a wild card. I think teams are all over the map. Some view him as early 2nd round, maybe even sneaks into the 1st. Others think of him more as a 3rd round receiver. But that's a big frame that can run.
Daniel, what do you think of Marvell Reese, especially his potential as a pass rusher?
He's exciting. To me, we've been talking a lot about comparisons with players, and with him, the obvious one, people talk about Micah Parsons because off the ball, on the ball, how do you use him? Rangy, dynamic player. I guess I age myself with this one a little bit, but I almost see a little bit of Clay Matthews when he was coming out of USC. We had the same discussions. Is he going to be an off-the-ball linebacker or is he going to rush? And it turns out he could do either, but he ended up having more impact coming off the edge. And I think most of the guys who've had that decision to make and teams that have had that decision to make, if they can do both, they prefer you to come off the edge. I think that's where he ends up. He's not polished. There's still development in terms of a rush plan and those things, but God gave that dude a lot of tools. I mean, he is big, long, explosive. He plays hard. He just needs to develop a little bit of a rush plan.
Daniel, knowing the Ravens.
What time to look at guys that didn't get combine invites? If so, what have you seen from now to those guys from their coaches?
I have to go back through my notes. I jammed 330 combine guys into my brain this week to get those guys watched, and then I like to use the runway from the end of the combine when we get to April to watch all the guys that were non-combine invitation guys. It's a lot of guys for a one-man band to sort through, but I'll get there.
Daniel, knowing to answer this, but what's been when you see a Brian Hartline receiver, what are the common traits? You mentioned Ibuka and Jason.
Yeah.
And then where does Tate kind of rank with the guys from the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I would say polished. Polished, professional. They've all been really smart, to go back to the previous point. But from a development standpoint, they are so far ahead of everybody else that's coming from these other places. The guy's just been exceptional. And I think a lot of times, 5-star kid, and it's like, oh, Brian Hartline's an elite recruiter. And I'm like, look, I don't have a relationship with him. I've talked to him a couple times, so it's not like I'm doing a buddy a favor, but he's developed these guys. He's coached these guys. He's instilled in them a professionalism, a work ethic. You talk to the coaches that have had all these players that have come out of there. It's hard to see those guys not being successful for how they've been trained.
Daniel, Tate versus the other one?
Yeah, Tate is, to me, like, if you're going to do the different styles of players, I would say more similar to Olave, but just he can really gain ground and get up top and can be a home run hitter while also having the fluidity and the flexibility to run any route you need to run. But I view him as where JSN's going to catch 100 plus balls. I view him as someone who's going to probably catch 70, 80 balls, but he's going to have a high yards per catch, and then he's going to be someone in the red zone that can really make plays.
Daniel, knowing the Ravens the way you do, did you see this as a draft for them where they sort of go back to their roots and focus on big guys and building up the trenches?
Yeah, I think big guys. I think defensively, it's just there's such immense pride in that building for how you play defense, and it hasn't been up to their standard. So, when they're at their best, they are big. They're big everywhere. It's not just, they like big DTs or like some big edge-setting guys, but they have big corners, big linebackers. Like they want to be kind of a bully, and I think they got away from that a little bit. And when there's some finesse players, some speed players that they brought in, I looked at them trying to get back to that tenacity and that style.
Daniel, if A.J. Brown stayed in Philadelphia, is there a wide receiver on day 2 or day 3 that with just a few touches a game could impact the Eagles? Right after the catch player, maybe somebody with speed that might fit that offense?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one to me would be Omar Cooper Jr., who that's like one of the most fun players to study and watch. I think he's going to end up in the first round when it's all said and done. But that's the style of player that you're talking about, someone who can really catch and run, make things happen after the play. There's a much smaller version of that. Antonio Williams out of Clemson is excellent with the ball in his hands, run after catch. I think he's a really intriguing player in that mix as well. So it's a long list of receivers, but I will say, I mean, AJ's 225 pounds and moves like that. You don't usually find a lot of those guys on a yearly basis, so it's going to be a little hard.
If you're a GM, where's the value in taking a nose tackle? There's some good ones in this draft, but again, where's that value based on the way the game is played?
I think everything's come full circle. When I started scouting in 2003, it was, we can have, value in a player that's maybe a 2-down player. He's dominant against the run. He can anchor then against double teams, play a gap and a half. And then it went, okay, well, we're a passing league. And if you can't rush the passer from inside, you can't take that player in the first round, or you can't take him high. They don't carry the value. And now we've kind of come back where we've got all this shell coverage and 2 high safeties where you have to be able to stop the run with fewer bodies. So now that value is there. Now Seattle has cracked the code. They got 2 elite players in Murphy and Leonard Williams who can do both. They can hang in their anchor run, play 2 gaps, and then they can also rush the passer. They're going to have to pay a premium for those guys, But like in this draft, a player like McDonald, where I think most teams would say, you know, in the heyday of the Chiefs offense, the Rams offense, like where that was going was like, well, you can't take him in the first round. He's going to be more of a run stuffer. I think now it's kind of maybe coming back to that type of a player having more value.
Future version of that tight ends and more 12, 13 personnel, and how does that impact the draft this year? Chasing that.
Yeah, again, go back to, you know, Seattle and the Rams, playing with a lot of tight ends, using heavy personnel, having guys that can put their hand in the ground and aren't just going to be, you know, athletic, you know, glorified big slot receivers. So, you know, this draft doesn't have like the high-end guys like we had last year with Loveland and Warren, you know, his hand in the ground, traditional Ys that can do everything. I don't think we really have that here. Sadiq from Oregon's gonna, we'll see how big he is, but probably a little under 6'3" or at 6'3", 245, probably more of a move player. But, you know, I've talked about him with different teams, and they said, we already got a tight end. I'm like, yeah, but he can be the complementary tight end, and he can block and do those things. So having tight ends that are well-rounded, even if they're the move guy and not the hand-in-the-ground guy, I think teams are looking for that.
Where do you see Hill Jr. in this class? A 3-year starter at Texas that moved all the way around that defense. A year ago was a top 15 conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't done him until this year, so I had no context of what the expectation was, but I think he's absolutely in the mix, you know, for being a first-round player. He's big, he's fast. I like the fact that he plays with a lot of energy. I was talking to some teams that have gone through interviews, you know, talking about players, and his name popped up as someone who's handled himself. Scouts will talk about like he handles himself like a mic, like he's got a presence about him. He's a really good communicator. So you put that together with some size and anxious to watch him work out, but he plays really fast. Now that's something that teams are going to covet.
DJ, what is your biggest hit and your biggest miss?
Oh gosh, the hits you rarely remember the hits. Like those are the ones you forget quickly. You know, during my scouting days, there was a group of us, it wasn't me, it was a group of us that on Kelsey. So I always tell the story like, hey, what's your greatest hit? What's your greatest miss? I'm like, well, we took Kelsey in the 6th round. Before I pat myself in the back, we took Danny Watkins in the 1st round. So I endorse both, so you gotta wear the good with the bad.
DJ, with the offensive tackles, the top 2 in this class, how high could you see them rising in the 1st round? A team like the Giants, their right tackle, uncertain future with Illuminor. Do you think that they could prioritize that pick there? Or what's maybe holding them back from taking Fano or Maui Noah?
I think they're good players. Avim is, Maui Noah is my 12th player, Fano's my 14th player, so maybe a little bit higher than I have them graded, but you know, if you want an offensive lineman, you got to take them early. You know, these guys are all gone. When you study, you know, the top teams in the league, for the most part, all their tackles are premium picks. So you have to almost get uncomfortable with where you take them if you want one, or you just won't get one. So, you know, sorting those two guys out, I started out with Fano and then Maui Noah. They're totally different. Fano's a little more dynamic and twitchy and explosive and more of a mover, and Maui Noah's powerful. You know, I thought Maui Noah was going to be 320 pounds, and then just over the last 10 days, I found he played like 345 with like less than 20% body fat. Like he is a strong, sturdy dude. So, you know, I think they're both grade-wise. Maybe that's a little bit early, but again, you know, we used to always have that conversation about corners when we were in the draft room. It's like, well, I think he's a 3rd-round corner. It's like, well, we're never going to get him then, because you have to move those guys up the board, or you won't see these corners tackles. That's just the way it goes.
Tackle prospects. How do you size up Proctor and Freeman?
Yeah, Proctor's like 2 different human beings. So you watch him in the opener against Florida State, and you know, was told he came into camp around 390 pounds, and he was heavy. He looked heavy-footed. He was slow, and he struggled. And then he got himself into shape. You get to the later tape later in the year, and you see the athleticism. He's got great feet for a big guy. I think he got down in the 350s, and we'll see how he shows up here. I anticipate he'll show up in shape, but when he's in shape, he's as talented as any lineman in this draft. So that's going to be the question he has to answer. And then with Monroe Freeling, doesn't have a ton of experience, but he's got an ideal NFL frame. He's really athletic and explosive. His tape's just a little bit of a roller coaster ride, so he's not a developed product yet.
Daniel, what are Kyle Lewis at Pitt? He's adamant about sticking to linebacker. He had a really strong Senior Bowl week. Do you see a space for him in the league at linebacker, and where do you have him in your board?
Yeah, to me, I think he's a day 2 pick. Yeah, I think he's a plug-and-play guy. He's a little lesser version of Schlesinger, who we saw as a defensive rookie of the year last year. You know, just maybe a little undersized, but can run and cover. Like Kyle Lewis can cover. So having somebody like that can match up with tight ends and backs, he can fool around and mess with slot receivers as well. Like that is an outstanding trait that he possesses. So, linebackers that can run, maybe a little undersized. We'll see it with Justin Jefferson, new Justin Jefferson from Alabama in this class, who's going to be around 220 pounds and might run the 4.3s. Like, we talk about the league getting bigger, but yet there's still a place for those guys, especially when you're in nickel and you're in sub and you can get those guys out there, let them run and cover.
Daniel, what are your thoughts? Offensive coordinators are getting wiped out like every year at the NFL level. Quarterbacks are finding success on their second, third team sometimes. And now you've got a lighter quarterback class. I'm just curious your perspective on where we're at from a development standpoint at the quarterback position.
Well, I think a lot of the development, unfortunately, has to take place at the college level, and that's why there's been an emphasis on guys who started a lot of games. Bo Nix playing a lot of football in college, I think really helped him as he, moved on to the National Football League. It's hard to develop these guys when the backstory is when the salary cap changed, or when the rookie signing structure changed after Stafford and Bradford and all that, where now it's not quite as cost prohibitive to go back into the quarterback market, that the window has shrunk for quarterbacks to be successful, where it's 2 years in and hey, we're moving on. In Josh Rosen's case, 1 year and you move on. So your expectations have risen, and you don't really have as much time to get those guys developed, and there's immense pressure on coaches to win right now, get them up to speed, or else we move on. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings are having this same situation right now with J.J. McCarthy. How do you balance being patient and giving him time versus we got to win, we got to get going right now. So it's never been more challenging. I think we're going to see more of these reclamation projects, success stories, Sam and Baker. I do think we're going to see more of that. We'll see what happens with Mac Jones. He gets another opportunity somewhere. Malik Willis is looking like he's going to be highly sought after. So we're going to see a lot more of these guys who were talented enough to be first-round picks on teams that didn't have the luxury of being patient enough with them get opportunities elsewhere.
Daniel, what are your thoughts on the three pass rushers this year, kind of at the top with Reese and Bain and Bailey? How would you compare them to previous classes? Would you have them ranked pretty high in previous classes, and which do you think would be the best fit for the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick one there. So I have Bailey first. I think he's the most polished of the pass rushers. He's got elite juice off the edge. He's got a long track record of being able to do it. I feel like he's safe, but yet offers upside. So I have Bailey there. Reese has the most in his body, the most upside there. It's going to take some tutelage and some development with him as a rusher if he's going to make that full-time transition. And Bain is he's a bully. He's a very physical, tough, rugged player. And when you look around some of the top guys in the league right now, Tuli Tuipulotu is a great example. I think he had 13.5 sacks. Khalil Mack's made a career out of rushing with that style of rush. Bain brings an identity and a temperament to it. So I say that as him the third rusher, but I think there's a good chance that could be the perfect fit for Tennessee. Him and Jeffrey Simmons, Robert Saleh trying to build a real physical group, with Jacksonville as a physical team. Indy wants to be a physical team. Houston wants to be a physical team. So I think Bain in Tennessee makes a lot of sense.
Daniel, what are your thoughts on the Steelers' needs and how should they address them?
The Steelers, they've done a good job with the offense and defensive line. They need some skill. So getting another receiver, finding a corner, I think they go after focusing on bigs. I think they go little.